Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good, from science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Rafe, and we've got a great show today, because by decree, it will be a great show. So, and the one reason it is a great show is because we have great listeners. You guys know this, right? You guys are the reason we are a global top 10% podcast. Remember, you can reach us at bufnagle.com. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review. Hit subscribe or like or the smiley star or the happy cookies or whatever it is that you have on your podcast app player machine that lets you listen to the podcast diverse. Please hit that subscribe button, and the buff will be delivered to you the moment it is available. You're like in the front of the line, like back in the day when Southwest had those. You could get. You used to be able to log in 24 hours prior to your flight, and you could get, the ticket to get you on the plane early, and you could pay $10 extra to get to the front of the line. That's what the subscribe button's like, but it doesn't cost you $10. It's absolutely free. It'll be there, and the buff will be waiting for you when you wake up in the morning on Tuesdays. Remember, tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode, and you can hit the buy me a coffee thing and buy me a coffee or a cookie or a plane ticket on Southwest Airlines, whatever you would like. Today is, how these things start off. They start off with some innocuous kind of event that happens to me, and then I go down a little rabbit hole, and next thing you know, I have something worth talking about, I think, with you guys, and hopefully providing, one of these things that makes things. One of these all things good things, and something that help you pursue the adventure of life. And today's impetus is my friend, the Twitter machine, X. I guess it's called X. I got to start calling it X, but Twitter's such an easier name to say, and X sounds so. I don't know. It doesn't fit my style. I'm going to keep calling it the Twitter machine until they make me stop. And one of the wonderful things that I follow on Twitter is an account called Beautiful Things, and it's filled literally with beautiful things, paintings and poetry and artwork and clever sayings, that kind of thing. The things that make you say, "Oh, isn't that nice?" or get you to think about wonderful, glorious stuff. Some of it is, since it's beautiful things, it falls in the realm of all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. So that's why we follow it here on the Buff. And the post today or last week or sometime recently was a poem from Percy Shelley and an accompanying image that the poem is describing. And the image is the birth of Venus, sometimes called the birth of Aphrodite by Sandro Botticelli from 1480. So late 15th century. 1480. What was going on then? 1480. That Columbus had not gone to the New World. A lot of exploration is taking place. People are going around the Horn of Africa. The Europeans are starting to discover that there is something to the west, but not quite yet. So they're getting very close to going that way. And Shelley Botticelli is painting. And he paints the birth of Venus, which I think you've probably seen this painting. It has this maiden, this beautiful. Well, she's beautiful. That's who she is. She's Aphrodite, or she's Venus, and she is standing on a clamshell, in a gigantic clamshell, and she is just the way God made her, with no extra accoutrements on there. Her hair is flowing in very strategic ways, along with her arm placement. And there she is, that she has been born from the sea surf. And Shelley, later on, so he was what, mid 1800s, so a couple hundred years later, Shelley comes along and he looks at this painting and he decides to write this little poem. Now remember, Shelley Percy Shelley was married to Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, and we actually talked about Frankenstein on last week's episode. We mentioned on last week's episode the episode we did on Frankenstein over a year ago. Episode 160 is a wonderful episode on Mary Shelley and Frankenstein. And well, this is Shelley, Percy Shelley, so that's Mary Shelley, so that's Frankenstein. So that's the cross reference. If you listen to the Buff long enough, you will be caught in the Buff web, and everything will tie into everything else. So anyway, the Beautiful Things podcast, or ex Twitter machine thing, posted the Shelley poem today. And the Shelley poem reads thusly: Look, why shine those floating bubbles with such light divine? They break, and from their mist a lily form rises from out the wave in beauty warm. The wave is by the blue-veined feet scarce pressed. Her silky ringlets float about her breast, veiling its fairy loveliness, while her eye is soft and deep as the heaven is high. The beautiful is born, sea and earth may well revere the hour of that mysterious birth. So there's the poem, The Birth of Aphrodite, discussing the painting, The Birth of Venus, or Aphrodite, by Botticelli, which was done before Columbus. So back in the Dark Ages, early Renaissance, these things were being painted. Hundreds of years later, poets were writing about them. And that brought to mind, when I read that, and I was looking at the painting and appreciating the poem, and I was appreciating the painting and thinking about what was in the past and what is in present day. And my brother at the time sent me a little image on the text message machine, and it was an AI painting, or painting from an AI machine, I guess I would call it, that depicted. He sent me two of them, actually. He sent me a picture of something Christmas related. It was like a family doing a Christmas thing, and he also sent me one of a backgammon tournament. So my brother's a big backgammon player, and he goes to a lot of tournaments, and he's very good. And so he understands a lot of these things, like the complications of the game and how it gets, how you win at that, and how you avoid losing, and all the subtleties in the gambling world that is backgammon. It's a gambling game, although it's not always played for money. But he goes to tournaments and does those sorts of things. And so he sent me this image of a backgammon tournament, and it was full of the classic, what are considered now classic AI mistakes, I guess is what they have. So if you look at some of the hands, the AI does not do well with fingers. Okay, it has trouble drawing human hands that look like human hands. They may have too many fingers, or not enough fingers, or they may have, I don't know, webbed feet, or they have trouble getting hands and fingers right. It doesn't do very well with fire. Fire seems to look wonky on AI images because it's not. I don't know why people have conjectured about why it may not look good. Why fire may not look good on AI images. The backgammon boards, of those of you who play backgammon, you know that there are 24 little triangular spikes on the board, 12 on one side, 12 on the other side. It drew backgammon boards that no backgammon player has ever used. It had extra spikes and little backgammon men in the wrong places, and the triangles were oriented the wrong direction, and all sorts of things were wrong about that. The hair on some of the people look weird, and that's difficult for AI image things to do hair right. And there are other things that AI typically does a poor job at, things like teeth and like putting the wrong kinds of clothes on people. In the Christmas one, there were issues with the fire, and there was issues with what there was a little boy and a little girl in the image, and the little girl looked like a little girl, and the little boy looked like a boy from the top half, and a girl in the bottom half, and it was confused. It didn't. We say it was confused, but now before I go any further on this, I'm going to have you know that those of you who reach the Buff through something like Facebook or the Twitter machine or LinkedIn or there's other places where we get posted, you may recognize that on occasion, the buff will use the AI image generator to create I don't know what's it called, the image for that week's show, something that will be appropriate. I think this week it will probably be the picture of the birth of Venus. But, so I'm not above using that tool because it helps avoid things like copyright of images and using somebody's property without their consent. And we don't want to go do that if we don't have to. But so we do that on occasion, and I try to pick images that are not going to have obvious errors like that. And because the AI machine is just a tool, and it is, well, one thing it's not doing intelligence. Okay, so it's a computer. It doesn't have a mind. It doesn't have a brain. It doesn't think. It doesn't reason. It follows logic principles that are built into its algorithm, and its algorithm at its heart is basically just nonlinear regression. And that's a difficult thing to get your head around. For those of you who have done regression in your little stats classes or your math classes, regression says that if you give me a set of X's, some predictors, that I will come up with a formula to give you a Y. That's regression. So I might say that a person's weight is a function of their height. It's not going to be exact, right? But if the taller you are, the more you're going to weigh. The smaller you are, the less you're going to weigh. And that's not always exactly perfect. There's some variation there. Not everyone who is 5'6" weighs the same. Not everybody who's 6'2" weighs the same. There's variation within each X, but in general, as you go from shorter to taller, you tend to get heavier. And there's a regression there that you can fit that line. And what you end up getting when you do that, certainly with the predicting someone's weight from someone's height, when you do that, you get an estimate of the average weight for a given height. So given the X's, it will give you an estimate of the mean of the Y's. And that's kind of an interesting thing because you can, if you have the right Y's and X's, you don't need to use body weight and body height. You can use an image that has a label of, backgammon on it. And you can use the pixels in that image, and you can use some sophisticated algorithms to parse that image and determine what's in it, and then put coefficients on what you think you find. And then based upon those, you have a regression. You have those things that estimate backgammon and the thing that doesn't estimate backgammon. And those things can be different. And based upon that, then you can draw a backgammon image by averaging the coefficients from the model that you fit to your data. So that's all that the AI is doing. I mean, it sounds so simple when you say it that way, but that gets complicated because you have to decipher what's in the image. You can't just take the pixels and say, in this pixel I saw green, in this pixel I saw blue, because that's just going to give you gray mud. But you have to try to turn the image into things they can recognize. So you have it scan for things that look like faces, hands, triangles, circles, squares, other things like that, trucks, cars, cats, lions, trees, that kind of thing. And there are some things that are obvious to humans and they're not obvious to computers. And that's why that CAPTCHA thing on websites makes you identify everything that looks like a crosswalk or a staircase or a bicycle to get you to prove that you are a human, not a machine. So you take a bunch of images that say backgammon or Christmas or whatever it is, you digitize them, you turn that into a bunch of recognizable stuff in the image in terms of a vector of coefficients, and then you average them, or you do a weighted average of them, and you produce a new picture. And the same works for all kinds of AI. For if you want to write a story or a poem, or if you want to summarize people's impressions of how the comet looked when it came over. There are lots of things you can do if you can come up with a way to identify your X's and your Y's. But the thing to note about this, I think the thing to note is that the computer doesn't know anything. The computer doesn't draw an image. It doesn't recognize what's in the image. It doesn't say that this is a candle and that's a flame on top of the candle. All it does is do the algorithm that the people gave it to do. And I was talking with my brother after he sent the images, and we were talking about that, complaining about the state of the world and that sort of thing. That's what old guys do. And I told him the story that a former colleague of mine told me about. He was a big World War II fan, and he wasn't a fan of the war, but he was a history buff, I guess. Let's put it that way. And he told me about these. When the war in the Pacific required, the Pacific's a big ocean. And if you don't believe me, you can do the Magellan episodes way, way, way back in the early part of the buff. The Pacific is very big, and we had lots of airfields and supply stations and things like that all over the Pacific, and they were staffed by people. And some of these islands had natives or locals living on them before the Americans showed up. And you can argue whether we should or shouldn't have done that, but that's not the point of this exercise here. The point is to describe what happened. And when we were there, the planes would fly in and they'd bring in fuel, or they'd bring in armaments or replacement men to man the station, or they would bring provisions as well. And the most important provisions were, of course, alcohol and cigarettes. Right? That's what everybody wanted to have. And so they brought those things in, and those things became favorites with the locals. And so the locals would watch what the guys do, and they would see the men out there at the airfields, and some people would be up in the tower with binoculars, and they'd be talking on the microphones, and there would be what do you call it, loudspeakers and things for people to do stuff, and there would be guys on the ground with flags to indicate wind direction or speed, or all these kinds of things that people on airfields do. And they would be doing those things, and the natives would watch them, and then after a while the planes would come in and they would deliver the alcohol and cigarettes, and then they would fly away. And after the war, then the Americans said, well, we're going to go home. So they hopped in their planes and they flew away, but they left all the other stuff behind. I mean, you don't tear up the airfield, and you just leave it there. And so the natives would be like, well, now where are we going to get alcohol and cigarettes? And there were anthropologists that would watch the natives to see what they did after the Americans left. And they would climb into the control tower, and they would put on the little hats that they found that were left over, and they would push the button on the microphone, and they would talk into it. And of course, nothing happened because nothing was turned on. There was no electricity there because the generators had been taken back, and there was no fuel for that anyway. And they would talk in a little microphone, and some people would hold the binoculars, and they'd look around, and guys would be on the airfield waving the flags and pointing doing all the things that the aviation guys did, and the planes never came. And they were despondent, and just like, how are we going to get our alcohol and our cigarettes? Because we were doing everything that the Americans were doing, but the planes weren't coming. So what are we doing wrong? And what you can see there, and it's kind of a funny story, and it seems to me like I'm poking fun at these guys, but I'm not. I'm going to tell you where this is going. Is they were practicing something that everybody practices. Certainly when they're coming into a new knowledge field, they are practicing something called mimesis, which means which is the source of our word meme, which is like a play acting kind of thing. Some people call it cosplay. So you see little kids do that. I have grandkids now that are 3-4 years old, something like that. And when they're as young as 1 and 2, they practice mimesis all the time. They hold their little baby dolls and they rock them back and forth, or they grab a circle and they pretend they're driving a car, or they push around a play vacuum cleaner and pretend to clean the floor. And they are doing what they have seen done. And that's exactly what the natives were doing. They were doing what they had seen done. And because they thought it would produce an outcome, which is a rational thing to conclude, they were doing role playing. They're doing mimesis, cosplaying, something like that. And this isn't. They didn't do that because they were dumb. They did it because they just didn't understand how it worked. Okay, and it is akin to how the AI. It is akin to how the AI model works, but it's a little bit different. So you can teach the locals about aviation and planes. You can tell them, you have instruction. Here's how the plane works. Here's how the radio works. I mean, these things take a long time if they come from a culture that doesn't have these things. But human beings can learn those sorts of things. They can learn about aviation plane, and eventually they're going to learn that, going up to the tower and just putting on the hat, and looking at the binoculars and shouting into the microphone isn't going to cause the planes to come. Right? They can come to understand the meaning of those things, what they are doing and how they work. And men and women, cultures, human beings can be taught to do those things. They can assign meaning there, but not AI. AI is never going to do that. You could write code to have it look like it's assigning meaning, but then it's just running code. Okay. Man develops an understanding of meaning. Okay. So we see the word tree, T-R-E-E, tree. Okay? And I can say, well, that's a word. And you can say, well, that's just a word. It's just the word tree. But it has meaning behind it. When I say the word tree, you picture in your head the idea of a tree. You see a wooden trunk and leaves on the top, or you may see a palm tree with palm leaves on the top, or you may see a fallen tree, or you may see all the other kinds of things that we use the word tree for, but it has meaning to you. It conveys more than just that sound, that compression wave that bounces off your ears. The word is more than the sound. Okay, it has meaning in it. It's not just the sound. It stands in for an idea or a thing or even a concept. Okay, and in fact, I can use that concept, that idea, and I can apply it in a new situation. So I can talk about something like a tree of life, or a directory tree on my computer where my files are stored, or even like a family tree. I can conceive of that idea. If I know what a tree is, I can apply outside things to that, and I can get new meaning from old meaning by putting it together. Okay. I can make a metaphor, like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I may not be talking about apples or trees at all, but if you understand the concept of a tree and how trees produce fruit and how gravity works with when the apple gets ripe and how it falls to the ground and hopefully doesn't roll away, then I can say the apple doesn't fall from the tree. And the meaning of the word tree and apple and gravity and all those other things create new meaning for you. Okay? That's how language works. And I don't understand how that works. I don't know how our brain is capable of doing that, but now our brain is capable of doing that. And I know computers absolutely suck at that. Okay, the idea that they can understand. I always say that we shouldn't have to worry about the robots taking over the world because we have sarcasm on our side. That for them to get sarcasm is going. I don't understand how you teach them to understand that, because there can be no clues. Right? And I can say apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and somebody go, yeah, I got you. Yeah, that's right. And we're not talking about apples and trees at all. So anyway, the AI can't do that, okay? AIs aren't doing any of those things. They're not thinking, they're not writing, they're not drawing. They are simply finding a weighted average of coefficients in a model, okay? They only have data and regression models. No, the first question has got to be where the data come from. And that's a really big, that's a big question right there. Because if you're just scouring the internet for data, and all you have are the data that are out on the interwebs. Like if this podcast isn't being, and I've said this before, if it's not being transcribed into some sort of digital form for the AI models, then this podcast isn't in the AI space. These guys aren't using that information. And anybody, like, have we scanned all the great books? Maybe we have, but you know what's not in the data is the understanding of the nature of the human experience is not in the data. We can write about it. We can write stories about it. We can make metaphor to it. But to really get it, you have to live the life. And the computers can't do that. So they have data, which are questionable at best. They have regression models, but they don't have meaning. All they can do is average around in the space where they are. And if they average around and they create more content, well, that content is just It's just an outcome from the data they already have. So there's no new data being made from the AI models. It's not new. It's just rehashed stuff of old. So what does all this mean? Well, I think it means a couple things. So one, you should read Shelley, and you should look at good paintings, and you should follow beautiful things on the twit machine, and you should think about the meaning that you have, that things have in your life, and how when you watch little kids, they are doing mimesis, they are doing copying, they're doing role playing, they're doing cosplay, if you want to use it that way, and they are developing the idea of working with meaning when you work with language. So AI can be fun, but it's not it's not doing any intelligence. It's just it is just averaging a bunch of data and then putting it back together in a way that may or may not have any meaning. So don't pretend that AI is intelligent, because it's not, and don't fall for it when somebody tells you. It can be useful. Like we say, all models are wrong, but some are useful. Some of the AI models can be brilliantly wonderful to help you with things, but it ain't no panacea, as they say. So reach for meaning, seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.